Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association, now celebrating its 75th year of supporting science education. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And in today's episode, something special. We are still in St. Louis, Missouri, finishing up the National Science Teachers Association 2019 Annual Conference.
Yeah, that's right. We arrived on Wednesday night. It was really late, so our learning didn't start until Thursday morning. So we had a full day Thursday, Friday, and we're at the end of Saturday. So we fly home tomorrow, so we had a good 3 days of science professional development, learning some new tricks, learning some new tools, and just being inspired generally by the speakers.
We are sitting here in our hotel. We got to fly out tomorrow morning. We thought, let's just do a quick summary of the conference and just kind of talk about some of the things that really kind of spoke to us. And it goes without saying that probably the number one thing that kicked off the conference, very inspirational, was astronaut Scott Kelly. Scott Kelly, if you don't know, spent an entire year up on the space station. His twin brother stayed down on Earth. Some of the science that they did was comparing their bodies, the effects on long-term exposure in space. It was such a good presentation, and we didn't even realize we got in line kind of early. And then someone said, "Oh, if you're in the first 200 people, you get a signed copy of the book, and you'll get to meet him." And so this was like totally out of the blue. That after they gave us a card, and then afterwards we got to go and see Scott Kelly. He signed our book, said hi. I wore a ridiculous, not ridiculous, actually, I love the shirt. I wore
You got a lot of compliments on that.
I did. I have this shirt, we'll put a picture in the show notes, that my kids and wife got me. It's a white shirt with all little NASA logos, and everywhere I go, people are like, "Oh, that's a really good shirt." And of course, I wore it the day I saw Scott Kelly and got a picture of him. And even he, you can see in the picture, he's kind of looking at it like, "Whoa."
This guy is he's a fanatic here. Well, some of you may have been in the NSTA conference last year in Atlanta, and one of the sessions there was connecting with the International Space Station. That was amazing to see that. But we got to actually, see and hear Scott Kelly talk. Christine Royce, who's the president, and she kind of kicked off saying that one of her goals was to bring Scott Kelly to the conference, and they said, "Yeah, we'll see." And so, congratulations, you made it happen. It was really inspirational to see. Scott is, of course, a twin, and I have twin kids myself, and so that was kind of a neat little connection there. In addition, he talked a lot about his struggles in school and growing up. That he wasn't a student who always felt like he had to put his nose to the grindstone with books, and he had a hard time kind of focusing that way.
Did not start off as a strong student.
No, and he also reminded us that anyone who does something starts off really horrible at it, but you work towards it, which is probably why his book is called Endurance, or at least one of the reasons is, because he had the perseverance to kind of keep working at something he really wanted to do. And that was really inspirational to think about. All the students that we work with that might not think that they're going to make a lot of themselves, but here's a kid who thought, "I'm not going anywhere," and he becomes an astronaut. His brother becomes an astronaut, and he's got like the record for spending the most time in space a year on the International Space Station.
And he was talking about how do you go from a person, he was inspired by reading the right stuff when he was 18 in college, not sure what he was going to do, and how do you go from reading a book to becoming an astronaut. And he said it wasn't like this direct path. It was a series of setting small goals and reaching that and then moving to the next thing. But it was a great talk. It was fascinating. I'm really looking forward to reading the book, and hopefully maybe my own children will check it out.
It was a great start, and right after the speaker, NSTA did a little bit of like, we're going to celebrate our 75th year, as well as
they had birthday balloons. And,
Christine Rice had this little like birthday candle hat, which was pretty cool. We also heard about a possible name change for NSTA because it's the National Science Teachers Association. They'd like to change it to the National Science Teaching Association. So if you're an NSTA member, you get a chance to vote on that. So look for that information coming in the next few months where you get to have a voice in saying, is this direction we want to head down with NSTA in the future? This is, I think, an important step for us in NSTA to reach beyond thinking of just science teachers in the classroom into expanding into science teaching in whatever classroom that is.
Yeah, to be more, to include more avenues for people to learn science and how that gets to them. They are talking about, if this change does go in place, that they'll like kind of rebrand the logo possibly, and just get that NSTA may have sort of a new look next year, and it should be exciting. It's kind of fun to watch.
So we made sure to get a picture in front of that NSTA logo, because that might be the last time it's there.
Yeah, the original logo. But you never know. So we also went to some sessions together. We went to some sessions on our own. We did go to big data session. It was like looking at big data for elementary. It was a session from PBS Learning Media. PBS Learning Media has, this is one of those sessions. We went to a couple like this where it's PBS or it's NOAA or it's NASA. These are resources that we're essentially, we're paying as U.S. citizens, we're paying for them already. And sometimes you forget about some of the great things that are available free at these resources. So the PBS Learning Media was a good example of all kinds of lessons that they have built out using data that's been collected from sites like NASA. They had this awesome video that they put together, starting like with a view of the Great Lakes, and it was kind of reminds me of the Powers of 10 where they pull away, but they were using all kinds of information that NASA provided and that was observed and collected to make this simulation, and it just took you on this journey.
Rachel Connolly was the person giving the presentation. We've actually had Rachel on the show before talking about content from PBS there.
The Hunting the Elements, I think.
Getting ready for Hunting the Elements. And, this was a session on thinking about phenomena that you can bring into your classroom, things that you can't always see or easily observe within the classroom. And that's part of the reason that she wanted to highlight some of the things that PBS Learning Media can provide in terms of phenomena and what students can make out of that. So, observing the solar system, she talked about, seeing shadows on the earth and what does that mean for seasons. And so other things like that where I thought, that's a great opportunity to remind ourselves that, we can go outside and observe some phenomena in our local backyards, but at the same time, there's a lot of things we can't observe. And this is one way to bring that back into the classroom. Yeah,
they have some great visualizations, and then they have it kind of set up so that you can push it out. If you use Google Classroom, you can assign things, and it's really kind of slick. We also went to a session about using actual weather data and trying to basically it was an online a series of graphs and tools that you can look at different types of weather data and climate data and allow students to ask questions and make predictions. That was really fascinating. Kind of I was just getting started looking at it. That's something I want to spend some more time looking at.
It's a great resource to start to get into. And they said, there's a lot of data out there, but where do you start? And so they tried to make a better graphical interface for it, which I applaud them at.
And they kind of toned down, or not toned down, but I don't want to say made it kid-friendly either, because that's not doing it justice, but just kind of made it easier to digest for students.
So it's not so overwhelming.
Yeah, so that you don't have to do so much. They did a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you can make adjustments for it. And then, of course, the exhibit hall. I think we spent some time at the exhibit hall right away off of Thursday. Huge exhibit hall. It always is. Walking around, see some of the greatest hits. Your Pasco and your Flynn and Vernier and Lego was there, of course.
I had to take a picture for my son. I'm learning about Legos.
Yeah.
That's part of my learning.
This is my job. So we always love the exhibit hall. We love the exhibitors and what they bring to the conference. Some new things that we may have spotted. There was the vaccine thing that was coming from a children's hospital. I think it was Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they had vaccines, and it was really kind of addressed. This is really in the news right now. They had some models of, is it viruses or bacteria? You're the biology guy.
Yep.
Both are right? Okay. And so they gave us a file where we could like 3D print some of these. I was kind of curious about doing that, but they have some lessons and resources. The other thing that caught Brian's eye,
to spread awareness.
Yeah. The games, those little tiny game pieces and things.
Yeah.
That was from St. Louis.
There is a company that comes from St. Louis that had some like science board games.
Yeah, Genius Games.
Genius Games, and we actually are going to hope to have them on the show. And these are cross-disciplinary ones. There's one called Ion that talks obviously about ions there. There's some biology ones there that were pretty good there, and the company has a new game coming out this summer based on the periodic table. And when you look at these games, these are high quality games. Mm-hmm. You look at the pieces. There's like a tiny little wooden microscope. It's
and
just
a little flask. I think they look like little marshmallows.
Little Erlenmeyer flask.
They look like little marshmallows for Lucky Charms, which makes me want to have Lucky Charms Science Edition with purple flasks and pink microscopes.
Yeah, and again, like Adele said, there's a lot of favorites out there. Carolina Biological Supply Company.
Oh yeah.
There was HHMI. I mean, again, lots of fantastic vendors that are really there to kind of show us what is available in science education.
What's hilarious is Carolina. They have like little bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was at a session, and it was about green screens and AR and trying to get like elementary schools to be more, elementary school class to do different creative things and stuff. And before the session started, only at a science teacher conference, there's this table of teachers, and she's talking about a friend is texting her who she's got seven millipedes, and she's trying to find a home for millipedes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, This is not something you hear all the time.
There was a vendor there that I wanted to look into, and I didn't get a chance to. I'm going to have to check online. They're called the Bug Chicks, and they're using insects for teaching purposes. And
the Bug Chicks?
The Bug Chicks, and I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. I don't remember seeing them last year, but then again, the exhibit hall is so huge that you can miss some things very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to put some time in for that. Brian and I also saw a session on GPS. We always are liking gadgets, and this was a fascinating session. The name of the speaker is escaping me, but we can put it in the show notes. But the session was just kind of doing a history of GPS, and what was fascinating, the main theme I thought was like, look how far we've come in such a short period of time. They had this graph about when the military basically flipped the switch and made the transition from having scrambled GPS signal, which went from like accuracy of 30 to 60 feet, I think.
Meters.
30 to 60 meters, to this graph where it was like perfect, like to,
3 meters or something.
The 1 to 3 to 5 meters that we have now. But she was talking about how much it affects our basically bottom line, how much it affects like commerce and all those kinds of things, because we have so many industries dependent on GPS. We learned about the other global navigation systems in other countries that are circling the globe.
Some work in concert with, and some work in competition with.
Well, not so much competition against us, but not all of our phones can pick all these things up, I think. And they talked about that. Some things that are going to have to change in the future. The idea that we could have just essentially, all kinds of things being connected to GPS and then providing these big data sets. She did a great interactive, it was an easy kind of like volunteers, a couple people with some ropes, and do a demo about how GPS works and how like the satellites just say me here now over and over again. That's how she kind of described it. And then how it does triangulation. And
not triangulation. It was trilateration?
Something like that.
Try. See how much we learned from this, right?
Try to go.
But I remember her saying it was not triangulation.
Try to go look in the notes, Brian, you wrote down.
I will have to go into that, yeah.
But that was really good. And we have the contact information. We might actually, we did touch base with her, and just to learn more, that could be a future show. I can see it already.
We've talked about GPS in the past. We will talk about GPS in the future.
You went to, with Kevin, for PlaceBased?
Well, yeah. Speaking of guests on the show, we've had, obviously, we one of the really cool things is we ran into a lot of people that we've had on the show. So we actually met up with Leah Gibson. We talked to her recently about some of the opportunities like Purple Plow in the agriculture community that way. And so we actually saw her. We tweeted out a picture of us with her. Another person that we ran into was Kevin Krasnow. And Kevin talked to us last year in a series on place-based education. So Kevin came in with a team from TSS, Teton Science Schools, and they talked a little bit about how they could use local phenomena in concert with place-based education. And they did a fantastic job talking about how we could use like something, even like the food we eat for lunch and how we could learn from that. I got to be honest, it was a fantastic presentation. The three of them, including Kevin, did a wonderful job keeping us on time. It was just like watching them.
That's where they brought the people from the conference in, right?
Yeah, so
from
one of the
conference
things that
center?
Yeah, so they're of course talking about place-based education. So they had the executive chef for the conference center that came in to talk to us, and we could ask some
talk about
ask
practice
some
what you
questions.
preach.
Practice what you preach. But the pedagogy that they demonstrated was masterful. It was really inspiring to watch, and like things like, oh yeah, they're doing this. It's very intentional. They did a fantastic job with the presentation that way. So kudos again to your team, Kevin.
That's the thing about conferences. There's just so much. And you got to split up, and then you hear a friend that saw a good thing, and then it's good to go with a couple people because then they can kind of grab things that you missed and kind of show up. Like I was at a different session during that time. That was the green screen one, actually, and they had elementary school kids like. They put them they had kindergartners do green screen so that they could go into their diorama and point out all the different things and explain it. So they were all kind of like shrunk teeny tiny into this big picture of their diorama.
Digital diorama.
Yeah, which was really great. In the real, so sometimes we see green screens and it's like, great, you took a picture and, you're standing in front of something, big deal. But they were kind of really stressing, like the whole point of this is to have kids go to some place they normally can't go. And they did a nice job about that and kind of I tweeted out like I was reinvigorated for that. And they did some things with AR, and that was kind of interesting. But then night.
Yeah, but before you even do that, I mean, like you tweeted that out, and I instantly thought, of course you can do that.
Yeah.
And I thought about connections I could make with the art teacher, where students can make their own artwork and do green screen within that art as well. So you have some cross-disciplinary kind of things going on. I just from your session and then your tweet out.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's another point to make is that, just because you may not have been able to make the conference, you can also search for the hashtag NSTA 2019.
It's just NSTA 19.
I've been using 2019.
Oh, it must pull up both of them. Okay.
Yeah, so I've been doing, well, in any case, you can search for a lot of that. You can
find a lot
of
information.
NSTA.
Yeah.
Yep. Follow NSTA, and you can find out a lot of things out there that people have shared from the conference. So just like Dale sent something out about what he learned, I was like, oh, that was just a great connection. And now you can take that and make it your own and try something with it that you think is important.
Yeah,
and maybe
for sure.
present in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to talk about the evening?
Yes.
This is the latest thing I've ever gone to at a conference.
Especially a Friday night.
But there's been a couple film screenings at NSTA, and I was like, I want to take advantage of this. And we saw a movie, and we are definitely going to have this guy on our show. His name is Scott. Don't remember his last name. Director of the movie Food Evolution, and it was a movie about taking an examination about GMOs. And that's a topic we've talked about on our podcast in the past. We did an episode about the whole thing that was happening in Hawaii, and that's how the movie starts off, talking about the papaya and banning GMO in Hawaii, and what does the science look like on that. And it was an excellent movie, but it really was more than being about GMO. It was about what is science? What is knowing? What is the science process? We had an excellent discussion full of science teachers after the movie. The director just sat on the table and just kind of talked with us, talked about his process. It was excellent. I'm really looking forward to getting that on our show. And if you ever get a chance to see Food Evolution, it was an excellent time. It was a really great way to kind of end the evening and then head into the next day.
What was fascinating about it is that it made me think of other things we've had on the show. Like Dale mentioned, we had the episode about GMOs and Hawaii, but it also made me think about teaching controversial topics in the science classroom and thinking about maybe the framework you might use in order to introduce that. And another teacher at the session said, I would love to use this. I'm thinking about clips that I can show, not necessarily the entire movie, but tease little clips in here and there, and as a way to kind of kick off the school year, maybe to get people thinking about the process of science and trusting the science that goes into everything around us, from the food we eat and to other things. So even though it is talking about food evolution and GMOs, like Dale said, it's way more than that. It gets into how do we trust the systems with the science that are telling us this is safe, this is not safe. And that part is a fascinating take on where we are with American culture, but also what those effects might have for the rest of the world.
We had a conversation even about just documentaries in general, because I think there's a rise in documentaries with streaming services like your Netflix and Hulu and HBO's doing more documentaries, that more and more documentaries are getting made. And I think the director said that he calls documentaries not interpretation of the truth, but he had a phrase how he described what it is. But clearly documentaries are, they have a viewpoint. They have a bias. They have an adaptation.
Which he readily accepted.
Yeah, and how do you handle that in the classroom? One teacher said, like, hey, if I play a documentary in the classroom, how is it just not perceived then by my students? Oh, you're just trying to get us to think X, Y, Z a certain way. And we had a nice discussion about that because, okay, you could at the end play the clips or play the movie and then say, okay, let's dig farther into this. What claims were made in this movie, those kinds of things. I really like that because I wasn't expecting, I guess I should have expected. It was a room full of science teachers and we all just rolled with it, but I wasn't expecting it to go to that level.
We were able to get a copy of it. We'll get a copy to download in the future. And they encourage you to kind of think about where you can use it in your teaching. And one of the things that I thought about was to partner with someone at a local university and have a community screening where we can talk about that. And
I thought the funniest thing though is the director says that he goes to the grocery store and he's like, he
goes to Whole Foods.
Some grocery stores, Whole Foods being included, and he's like, this is a little trick I like to play at the checkout counter, and my kids hate that I do it. And he was like, I'll go there with like two, both bananas, organic and non-organic bananas, and go, what do I do? It was a good movie. It was well done. Neil deGrasse Tyson is the narrator, so.
And the other movie we didn't get a chance to see was talking about the human element, which is the human impact from climate change, and it's something that we're looking forward to seeing when we're able to. But this is an opportunity to not only view a movie, but also to have that conversation. That was the rich kind of experience wrapped around the movie that you don't just get when you watch it at home and you're doing other things while you're watching it. So that was a nice opportunity just there. When you get a chance to do that at a conference, it adds a lot more to it than just the viewing.
Well, I mean, and there were certainly people who had criticisms with not the movie outright. I think they had criticisms with certain aspects of how the movie was done, and I don't think you'd get that rich of a discussion if it wasn't done face to face like that. You could see the caring in people's eyes and kind of listen to them and really kind of empathize with other viewpoints. And that's something really takes that face to face conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was on Friday, and we had a fantastic day Friday. But we had to get back because we presented today, which was Saturday.
Yeah, we went to a couple sessions. I went to a session about, it was one of NSTA's featured presentations. She does a lot of things with trees, and she makes connections with the science that she's doing. So she gave the example, like, I'm not particularly that interested in Final Four basketball, in NCAA basketball. But I do realize a lot of people are into it. And if you look at the
actual hardwood.
The
floor.
I wanted to say field, but it's not a field.
Not the field. The court.
Yeah, if you look at the court, that wood, what is that wood? And she had a whole description about, getting that wood. And then my favorite is that she tried to get tree climber Barbie. to make a Barbie doll for Tree Climber Barbie, and Mattel didn't want to do it, so they actually got people to make like seamstress to make convert old Barbie dolls into Tree Climber Barbie, and then she's like, "We're working on ground support Ken, but he's just not working out like we expected," which was hilarious.
Talk about place-based education.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a couple sessions for the elementary. I did one where I was able to visit. I was able to support some Wisconsin teachers that were talking about using children's literature in science, and so it was great to see them present. And then we went to another session which really caught our eye because it talked about invisible technology
integration,
in the elementary level, and particularly preschool elementary.
Yep.
It was funny because he kind of did a poll of the room. How many of you teach preschool, kindergarten? And then, like other people were like raising their hand, and they said fourth grade, and he's like, "Oh yeah, older kids." And it's kind of funny to think about that at NSTA, like, oh yeah, fourth grade older kids. Usually, there can be such a heavy emphasis on the secondary, so it was nice to see some elementary or even pre-elementary kind of focus there.
But it was all about kind of like letting the technology not be in the way and having them do some of the science practices of being able to observe a graph, for example, in simple steps. Like we're collecting some data. What does it mean when the line on the graph goes up? What does it mean when the line goes down? Starting with those small steps.
So that was
that
was a fantastic presentation that I got a lot out of thinking in terms of how we could bring it back to some of our youngest learners. Dale and I work at the elementary level, and sometimes that kindergarten class kind of scares us, but now I kind of want to steer into that, like, hey, what can we do with your kids to do some science and technology there?
And speaking of fabulous presentations, Brian did an excellent presentation with me. Brian
and I both together.
Yeah, Brian and I did a presentation on talking science.
Although we do have to apologize. We tried to do a recording of the crowd. There was a fantastic crowd. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
But we didn't catch the audio. For some reason, it didn't record. We do apologize, so we didn't want to...
Yeah, we had the whole crowd saying this is Lab Out Loud, but oh well, but better. We'll try again next time.
We appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yes. We got great questions from the group after the session. We went for the whole time, but we were really kind of talking about, of course, how we make the podcast, what is a podcast, and how podcasts are doing. Some of this was stemming off the if you haven't noticed, the most recent. Right? NSTA today, or NSTA reports?
NSTA reports.
The most recent NSTA reports cover story is about podcasting. And so it starts off about using podcasts in the classroom, having students record audio pieces. We're in there giving our experience with that. And we talked about different lessons. And I always like to talk about just having kids, instead of making a video, instead of using images all the time, give them the opportunity to just stop and listen and conjure up those images and visuals in their own mind instead of feeding them the visuals. So that was what I think that was a big theme of our presentation.
It was.
I hope that was a takeaway.
There was also an opportunity to think about not only using podcasts in the classroom, but maybe having yourself or students record in the classroom. And we do this with elementary students as a part of some of the Common Core requirements there, which can easily be done in the science classroom or in the science setting that way. One thing we definitely encourage is the process of rough drafting, because we know that the importance of multimodal communication, going beyond writing into some of that audio feedback and maybe some video or visual feedback as well. But the audio feedback is important. But when creating media, think about rough drafting. Think about not just hitting save and being done, but how can you make it better? How can you improve the product so that your voice gets across the best way?
Did you like what I said today? The save button's not the finish line.
I like that actually a lot.
Yeah. The presentation was great because we got some people, the fans of the show, because sometimes are you guys out there? So anybody who's listening, please let us know that you listen. That is just drives us, makes us feel great, and keeps us going. So anytime you can get a chance to give us feedback about the show, we really appreciate, whether it's a comment or some ratings or reviews in iTunes and things like that, or a comment on our website. That's really helpful. A couple people talked to us after the session. A couple people stopped us for selfies, which I'm not used to because I don't know how to look at the camera. And my kids always pick on me for that. There was another podcaster, someone else who makes his own podcast, and we might do a cross-podcastination.
You're trying to use pollination.
I'm trying to make a portmanteau out of pollination, yes. But yeah, so
cross-podcastination.
That sounds
so Dale would stay with the physics.
Yeah, so we had lots of engagement and interactions with some fans or listeners and other science teachers. Yeah. So it was really exciting. It was a fun time for that, and that kind of rounded out the whole day. We did catch a couple other sessions here and there, and kind of leveled
Finished
up the day.
out the exhibit hall.
We enjoyed St. Louis in the late afternoon then. Brian got a look at the arch for the first time.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
St.
We
Louis
went into
arch.
the old courthouse.
Yeah, the old courthouse where the
Dred Scott decision was
Scott
made.
walked by the Cardinals where they play baseball. We went to Snarf's Sandwiches 3 times.
Many times.
During this trip, which is insane, but it was it's quick and it was delicious. And
we stood in line for Sugar Fire.
Sugar Fire is this giant barbecue, right?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting.
Smokehouse.
Yeah, I actually used that in the place-based education conversation when I went to that session. They asked us, where did you go to lunch? What did you notice? Things like that. And, like a couple of things I was thinking in my mind, like, oh yeah, here I am going to barbecue and whatnot. And there's this like, first world decadence of like, give me the meats kind of a thing. But, as I was going through, I was thinking like, you know what, this isn't so bad. I'm going through, I've got a tray. It's got a piece of paper basically as the plate. The meat goes literally right on it. So there's not much waste in terms of the containers. And we're sitting at a table. There are communal tables. There's communal sauce, basically. You don't have individual condiments. And so there was like, okay, this isn't too bad.
Yes, it is a smokehouse, and yes, there is brisket.
Yes, I do realize that.
But it isn't being. There wasn't. You're not throwing away a lot of plastic. So
well,
at least on that
food
side
too,
of
because this place opens at 11 and closes when they run out of food.
Yeah.
So they're not throwing away a lot at the end of the day.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the conference. We wrapped up. Started thinking about future conferences. If you haven't been to a conference, something to take a look at. There's a few coming up. There's a STEM conference that is in San Francisco. That's in July. And then the next ones that come around are on the NSTA website. I don't know the dates of all of them, but I do know.
These are the regionals.
Yeah, the regional conferences are going to be at Salt Lake City. There's one going to be in Cincinnati. And there's one going to be in the other one's in Seattle.
And then next year?
The next year's national is back in Boston. Yep, Boston. So put that on your calendar. Maybe present.
Maybe we'll see you there.
The presentation call for presenters for the Boston one will be coming out soon. And so maybe you can be a presenter at one of these conferences and join us in the session lists. But other than that, that's it for the 2019 National Conference in St. Louis. We're going to wrap up. We have our Snarf sandwiches to finish up for the evening, and then we got to pack.
We have to do our homework first.
Yeah, and then I did say that we want to get our... And so then we're going to pack up and head on back to our homes tomorrow.
Please make sure that you leave any comments from your experiences at the conference. We'd love to hear from you. And, of course, give us any feedback on the show itself. You can go to iTunes or Spotify and leave a rating for us, or just leave a comment about any show suggestions. We're looking to wrap up Season 12 and thinking about next year with Season 13.
Absolutely. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.